Good morning, listeners, and welcome back to another season of the Matter Mentality Podcast. We talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to optimize your performance and life. Now, today's guest, I was very fortunate enough to meet and actually joined us on an episode of Table Talk. I was fortunate enough to be brought back for a second episode. Very much appreciated too that. I know it's not a easy given opportunity. If you've been around the strength world for some time, you do not really need this introduction. Tom has been probably around for, I think, about 15 years now. Multiple time British powerlifting champion, coached everyone from general population clients through to world champions. He's an author, he's an educator. These days, regularly appearing on Table Talk, as well as running some of their key content series on the Elite FTS page. It is Tom Sheppard. My friend, thank you very much for jumping on and joining me. I had a whole list of how I was going to describe that intro, and I was like, what are the big pieces that we can cover here? But 15 years is a long time to put into two sentences.
No, man, I appreciate it. I think you did a great job of bigging me up there. So that was that bribe was money well spent. I appreciate it.
Mate, you've just got back from a summit. How was that? How's we sort of spoke about this off camera, and I want to get the ball rolling just with that sort of conversation because I am very much in agreement with you. The in-person stuff is lacking in the industry at the moment, and with the generation of AI, with the online coaching space, with Zoom and social media, it's becoming a rarity to see in-person events taking place. So it is awesome to see you guys willing to travel and get out there and do that. How was the seminar?
Man, it was so much fun. And, Michael Silbernagel, who took me out there to North Dakota, great guy, who has also been on the Table Talk. His episode with Colton Razzo, for anyone who's interested in like collegiate strength and stuff, was a great one. He took me out there and he wanted me to kind of, for want of a better word, kind of give his coaches something to think about in terms of how they're teaching the lifts and things like that. So as I kind of said to you, I've been very lucky enough to be taught by some of the Shaolin masters at the Shaolin Temple, and it was cool because I'd spent a couple of years talking to really advanced trainees and athletes saying things like, you don't know how to stand, you don't know how to breathe, you don't know how to walk, so therefore you probably don't know how to squat or hinge or all the, and I say it like tongue in cheek, but it's also kind of true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to the Shaolin Temple and, to paraphrase, I didn't know how to walk, I didn't know how to breathe, I didn't know how to, and it's like, cool, there are so many more layers to this thing. It was kind of gratifying in that I felt it kind of showed me I was on the right path and I was asking the
Yes.
right questions, doing the right things, but I didn't maybe realize how far the path went in front of me. So that was a super cool experience. Like, man, I'm 15, 20 years in and I'm like a newbie all over again. Like I came
Yeah.
back from that trip and my training didn't really change in terms of the what's written on the notepad, but the mentality going into it was totally different. Like
Mm-hmm.
how I was thinking about creating the movement that I was looking for. And now it's trying to disseminate that out to other individuals and trying to show that, as I was kind of saying to you, that I don't think athletic movement and lifting based movement really has to be that different. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, we're constrained by, say, a barbell, which can't rotate, but outside of that, if you really understand at the foundational level what a squat is, what a press is, and all of that, then really you do the same thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're overhead pressing, incline pressing, or throwing a punch, you use the same internal mechanisms to do those movements. It's just some of the joint angles change a little bit. And what I found is going at it from that angle, it's like a harsher learning curve. And it's kind of hard at the start. But then what happens is when you go in and break down and start teaching these lifts, it's like, well, I only have to show you once and you kind of know now what a squat is. Like you now, because you understand what a squat is at a fundamental level, you know how to back squat, you know how to front squat, you know how to splint squat, add variation X, Y, and Z here. And it's like you have taught people genuinely to move as opposed to how to execute an exercise. And man,
Mm-hmm.
that's been so much fun. Like it's just been like another level added to this in-person work, which was already so gratifying. But when you see it kind of click with people, it's just great fun to watch. Like teaching people like really how to breathe and brace and root
Mm-hmm.
into the ground and create that kind of tension that maybe they've never felt before.
Yep.
When you one of the events here at Elite, I had a guy who's a 1,200 pound squatter, and he just comes out to me after the day one, and he's like, I've never felt that before, and 1,000 pounds has never felt so light. And I'm like, well, that's all the confirmation I needed. Thank you so much.
I can
I'm gonna
leave now.
keep
My job's
doing this.
done.
Yeah, I'm gonna take your word as gospel, and I'm gonna keep doing this thing and refining it because there must be something to it if there's something in it for him. And I just think this little piece gets looked over to like I love the programming, I love the sets and reps and all of this stuff, but I think we forget sometimes, perhaps because it's difficult to talk about that. Every movement you do might have like an external technique,
Mhm.
that was like a representation, but there's also like an internal structure and mechanism that is the thing that leads to what we see on the outside. And we know this. Like you'll do your set of 5 on squats, and like 2, 3, and maybe 4, if you're lucky, feel good. 1 and 5 feel like trash, but the video tells you they're all the exact same.
Yeah.
And like it's what's going on under the hood, like what's the
Yeah.
breathing and the bracing mechanism, how well are you using your adductors and your hip flexors to pull you into the floor, like all of this stuff the video will never tell you is going on the inside. And once you know that, you then all of a sudden you kind of, in my opinion, really learning the lift. I was
Hmm.
very lucky in that one of my very first coach, who was like a savant with kinesiology, but he also had a karate background, since he was like 4 years old. And at one point he told me, I've been doing push-ups for 35 years and I feel like I'm starting to get them now. And at the time as a 19-year-old, like you're like, right, whatever. Right. And I kind of feel
It's a push
now
up.
I'm
Shut up.
like, yeah, yeah, but like now I'm like, I get it because like there's so
Yeah.
much to this, and like I'm blissfully hopeful that there's so much more to uncover as I keep going down the rabbit hole too.
And this is kind of why like I really wanted to have this conversation. We to anchor back, and I'm so excited for this episode that came out. I left Elite FTS on the 4 hour drive through country Ohio. It wasn't really 4 hours. I left there with Brooklyn saying like I felt validated for the first time that my theories and frameworks were heard in a way that I think actually articulated how I view coaching and how I view individualization, which again is a big part of what you guys do. And
Mhm.
it was one of the first times where I'm like, it was met reciprocally. Like it was as
Yeah.
understood by those speaking to me as it was coming out of my mouth. And I was like, this was probably the best conversation I've had about what I do. And that kind of it led to wanting to dig into this more. There was more to you, there was more to what we were speaking about than just simply like X's and O's. And I think it's a really fundamentally missing area in coaching that people don't appreciate. So we have what we call like the matter triad, which is, in a triangular sense, we've got nutrition, everything encompassing nutrition. We've got physiology and everything encompassing physiology. But over the top, the overarching, I guess, principle is what we would label as psychology, and the brain and the way that we look at things, the way we perceive things, the way we learn, the way we take stuff in, the desire for continual learning, the desire for mastery, self-efficacy, all these things overarch physiology and nutrition at such a deep level. People just kind of perceive the X's and O's as sets and reps and what are your macros, and just so that's it. And I'm like, there's just so much more to people and to coaching than just simply whether you gave them an increase or decrease in carbs, whether or not we depleted glycogen, whether or not we're trying to load up sodium and potassium. Like that's the cool stuff. Great, that's fun, right? We get into a peak week with someone like this is how we're going to do it. But when you see someone's life change because of the prep they went through, because of the lift they were just under, because they proved themselves after being told they'll never squat again. They just did a 300-pound squat and they did it with relative ease. And all of a sudden you see this light bulb moment for them like, hey, imagine what else I'm capable of somewhere else. Imagine where I can transfer this skill or this philosophy and this belief system that I previously had that I couldn't do things. That's the power that I believe coaching has. And to meet someone as similar minded in that conversation, I didn't just want to regurgitate the conversation, but I thought this is where, a good flowing conversation is going to be. And I say that because one of the key points that we are very similar on is the appreciation of suffering and what it has to offer. And
Mhm.
I kind of wanted to touch on this, and that is that you've got a lot of background history in mental health, in suffering, and you can go as far back as this as you need to because it's going to lay some groundwork and context. I'm sure listeners that have heard your story before already understand it because you're willing to talk about it. But when you think about the way you understand suffering now, at a psychological
Mhm.
level, a philosophical level, the way that you apply it to coaching, how much of that philosophy do you think existed before those experiences that you went through? And you can please feel free to touch on those experiences.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
much do you think had to be earned through them for you to appreciate the way you coach now?
Sure. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it that way. There's, and this is something that comes up with Dave a lot in the table talk when we start talking about what we would call mistakes. And quite often mistakes are just lessons that you're looking at in too short of a time frame to understand what they are. Um, and the question always comes up like we're putting out educational content, of course, because you want to limit people's mistakes, but are some mistakes genuinely unavoidable? And are some mistakes would so crucial to your development that you shouldn't want to avoid them anyway?
Hmm.
And with what I went through and give the Cliff Notes version, I have, I wouldn't want to say how many suicide attempts in my history because I don't know how you draw the line between them, for example.
Hmm.
But we're talking like night times lay in the bathtub for whatever number of hours, seeing whether you can finally keep your head under for long enough, that type of thing. I got through most of my university degree, which was 4 years, self-harming every single day, with knives, scissors, whatever it was that was available to me at the time. And going through that, I still managed to somehow do quite well in my degree and function, as far as I'm aware, as a reasonable human being. But when I look back at those things now, people quite often respond quite negatively, or well, negative is the wrong word, but apologetic when
Yeah.
I talk about those things. And like, oh, I'm so sorry you went through it. I'm like, man, I'm not even in
Hmm.
the slightest. Like, I would not be half the person I am now if I didn't go through those things. And sure, there's a good chance that I shouldn't be here, very good chance, in fact, but I am. And I feel like the benefit of what I went through, which, I wouldn't wish on anyone, but
Yes.
the benefit of what I went through is that I feel I do have a perspective that others will very much struggle to gain on their own. And I can look at things a little bit more differently just because, when you spend several years of your life, like literally trying to die every day, you discover what is and isn't important as you
Hmm.
drag yourself out of that. And there was an interesting revelation, I think, as I did that, where when you give up the idea of you yourself being happy, which, may or may not have been correct, we can argue about what happiness even is in that regard. But what you do then is be willing to invest in the happiness of others because you feel
Hmm.
like your own happiness is a futile endeavor. And then you discover that that is where your happiness lays as a byproduct of that. And I feel like that was shoved in my face so strongly as I dragged myself out of that. Like, when are the, when you, no matter how dark things are, there are going to be tiny little glimpses somewhere. What are those tiny little glimpses? Well, guess what? They're not when you're thinking about yourself.
Hmm.
And there's an inherent reason that the term self-conscious has a negative connotation because self-consciousness is a negative state to be in. You don't think about yourself when you're in your flow state doing the things
Hmm.
that you love and enjoy, like when you're presenting in front of someone or in the middle of a good conversation. You're not worried about like is my glasses out of position or any of this other stuff. You know what I mean? It's being in a scenario where like you are outside of yourself, for want of a better way of putting it. So that just showed me that I needed to double down on a vehicle where I could do that, which is what pushed me into the coaching very much. I came out of my degree, believe it or not, degrees in marine biology, and because I had been a scuba instructor prior to that, and I was like, I have to go down this strength and conditioning, this coaching route. A, because it was more reliable for a start, but B, I was just like, I need to do something where I'm making other people's lives better. And I didn't know that's what the motivating factor was at the time. Like I
Hmm.
didn't have this epiphany that I wanted it to be exactly that. But when I now look back in retrospect, that is the thing that I was looking for. And without immense amounts of suffering, I never would have come to that realization. I might have been
Hmm.
miserable forever. And I think a lot of the time when we look back, or sorry, in the moment when we are deciding whether something is positive or negative, that's almost impossible to do
Hmm.
because a lot of the times the answer to that is how long has it been? What has happened since? Like
Yes.
in the moment, was it negative? Immensely. However, in the years that follow and the cumulative effect on my life, it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me alongside meeting my wife. Like the, so like it sounds like a very odd thing to say that something so painful could be a positive, but actually it certainly was because it allowed me this perspective on life that I never would have gained any other way. So, and my plea, I guess, to people who are going through perhaps similar scenarios would be that it does get better if you allow it to get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem that I had, and this was a really hard realization to come to, is that sometimes when you're in hell, you are actively trying to make your life hell.
Yeah.
That is actually your aim. And you kind of wear it like a badge of honor. And it's a really hard realization to swallow the responsibility of, yes, things might be bad right now, but I am actively making them worse.
Yep.
And until I stop doing that, I can't, the spiral's never going to start going back the other way, but it's very easy to play the victim card in your own head. I'm not trying to make any of this sound critical of people or negative in any way. Like I was there doing it myself. Like it's just human condition, I suppose. But there has to be this point where you realize that sometimes the master you're serving isn't the one you think you're serving.
Hmm.
And when you do have that realization, you start trying to put the cards more in your favor, then it's kind of like, I can't remember what the outtake is in the Bible. Is it the Matthew principle in the Bible where basically for those who have nothing, all will be taken, and those who have plenty, like more will be given? I've paraphrased it horribly there. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I feel I've been at both ends of that spectrum now. Like I've had nothing and
Hmm.
actively been making my life worse without even realizing, and been like, life can always be worse. You just don't know how it can be worse yet. But trust me,
Oh
there's a
yeah.
way around the corner. But then if that is true, then conversely, the opposite must be true, right? Like there must be an upper ceiling to how good life can be that you're also blissfully unaware of. That could potentially upscale exponentially. And I feel like I'm in that
Hmm.
phase of life right now. And there will be ebbs and flows, I don't doubt, and I will welcome them as best I can. But I don't think I would have believed my life could be this good or even
Yep.
accept it at a basal level if my life had not been that bad at some point
Yep.
either, you know? So I think making that realization that, like, sure, things happen, things can be good or bad in the moment or long term, but are you really, really serving the master you think you are, making your life better, or are you serving your hypothalamus and your short-term gratification and then making it out like you're serving some greater purpose for your life when sadly, a lot of the time we're not. And sorry, that was a lot of a rant there.
No, that was brilliant because you kind of touch on I like to try and preface conversations as not a gotcha moment. I don't, that's, we're not,
Mhm.
in any sort of like clickbait industry, or we are, but I don't want to be. But I look at it as challenges to point as well. And one of the things that we often hear is the idea that suffering is um, inherently bad. But at the same time, kind of like you alluded to there, a lot of people get caught up in the identity and the badge that they develop around the suffering. And so for me, and this goes back to a psychological root, is it's very hard to get people that are fixed in that position to move away from the identity because that's who I am and that's how I receive, especially in the social media world, it's how I receive credit, praise, validation, feedback. It's how I receive or I interact with society. I am this thing, I am that thing, this is who I am. And it's internalization versus externalization. And once something is internalized, it's very hard to move from it. It's a
Mhm.
key state of change to try and get someone to move from internalizing a concept. It's very acceptance and commitment therapy based tool. Trying to get someone to move from internalization to externalization, try and remove it from self as something that they simply recognize as opposed to who they are. And once you're in that sort of suffering state where you believe that is everything about yourself, it's very hard to move someone. And it's something that I guess from a challenge perspective, because I didn't want this to just be a conversation where we both agree, because literally I agree with everything you've just said, and I'll touch on even my own little experience of that shortly.
Mhm.
But it is something where it has to be phrased and structured through the lens that struggle offers the opportunity for improvement and growth if you allow it, which is very much alluded to how you spoke about it, right? We're not here simply saying like suffering is the suffering suffer for the sake of suffering. Suffering is cool because it allows you to X. Suffering can be a catalyst for change, it can be a vehicle for change, but to me there has to be a meaning behind the suffering that either you create or that one has got into it before the suffering begins. When I choose the route of high performance, when I choose the route of trying to change the world, when I talk about we're going to be in front of 1 million people speaking, training, and coaching, I genuinely believe that that is the suffering that I'm willing to die for. That is the change that I'm willing to make an impact for. And I said this on a podcast not too long ago with my mentor. For me, the biggest struggle that I have is that I am planting a seed that I'll never watch grow. And I know that the work that I'm leaving behind is not going to be something that I'll witness expand. But I know that in order for me to feel fulfillment and for what I'm here to do, it has to happen. So that suffering, what I'm going to go through in the nights where I'm sitting here at uni at, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm then doing client check-ins over to America for 16-hour days, and then still trying to do client check-ins back here in Australia, and then, onto the next trip and the next travel. All that stuff to me is like, that's water off a duck's back for the sake that I'm going to make that impact that I have to make. But that suffering isn't just because I want to be cool and seen as suffering. Anyone that knows me knows that philosophically, I will do all this all over again, and I wouldn't change a thing because it's led
Absolutely.
to be the position that I'm in and the impact that we're trying to make. And that's where I think we have to distinguish the difference between suffering for suffering's sake and just trying to make it sound glorious, and understand
Yeah.
that suffering with meaning and a purpose behind it is how you benefit and develop character from that suffering. Would you agree with that?
I think,
Disagree with that?
yeah, I think the way I would, and this is just maybe how I would frame it in my own understanding, would be suffering is integral and I would say necessitated, or necessary, I'm sorry, to create meaning.
Hmm.
However, suffering in of itself does not create meaning.
Yes.
Suffering towards the right aim and the
Yes.
right end goal creates meaning, whereas suffering as a vehicle of its own regard is basically just hedonism disguised
Yes.
in most ways. It's just pain and pleasure in most regards. So I think, and I've been there. I've been the training addict that was training twice a day, every day, um, because I just wanted to be the person who could outsuffer everyone.
Hmm.
That's the badge of honor. I like it's probably a lot of what the self-harming and stuff was as well. It's like, well, if you can't be happy, might as well be this other thing. And for me, that other thing was like, I can be the person who can just take anything and keep crawling forward. And there's a reasonable amount to be admired about that, I think. But what was the end goal of it? There wasn't one. It was
Hmm.
just a cyclical pattern in of itself that was kind of is it the Ouroboros, this snake that eats its own tail?
Hmm.
Whereas if someone is suffering for a greater goal, some kind of long-term goal, as opposed to this short-term pain, pleasure, hedonism response, then maybe there's something to be said for that. And we should be encouraging suffering. I think most of the time we are far too comfortable.
Hmm.
Like we have more things in our life to make our life comfortable and fantastic now than ever. And yeah, and we on average we are considerably less happy than we've ever been. At least
Hmm.
that, for as long as we've had these types of surveys, at least anyway. Because it turns out that when you get given all that you want, you don't have all that you want
Hmm.
because you're made to work towards something.
Hmm.
And I feel like we're a little bit lost in that regard with we don't know what we're working towards because we're very comfortable. And, I don't want people out in the cold and getting sick and all this type of thing. But I think then that in the same way that we made gyms because now our life is sedentary,
Hmm.
right? We did that to tick that physical box
Yes.
that we need to move, we need to do things that are physically strenuous as an organism. So we created gyms, we created training, and that was this wonderful outlet and it's been this fantastic thing. And I think now that perhaps life is getting inverted commas too comfortable,
Hmm.
I think there needs to be some kind of grand scale realization of your implicit purpose is perhaps no longer implicit anymore, and you need to maybe spend some time really digging into like what is the thing that you really want to do with your life as opposed to clocking into your 9 to 5 and watching
Yeah.
Netflix. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those things, but what are they serving? Why,
Yeah.
same with your climbing in the gym, like or getting ready for the stage. It's like, sure, you're 5%, whatever, but why are we here?
Hmm.
Like, are we here because you hate yourself? And like maybe that one day on stage is the one day you can look in the mirror and be not manically depressed, but then you spend the other 364 days of the year wishing you were that. Or are we here because getting to that point and stepping on that stage, regardless of the outcome, is significant to you that it illustrates qualities of a human being that you aspire towards?
Hmm.
So, and it's going to sound cheesy. I'm sure people have heard it so many times, but the why matters. Like
Yep.
the why and the aim really governs absolutely everything. And it may not on the outside to the exterior, but what happens on the interior, which is the important part, which is what this whole conversation is about, it changes that entirely. Like you can go through the same thing, the
Hmm.
exact same experience for two different end goals, and they are totally different. And we know that. Like, how many people love the exhilaration of like an all-out set in the gym, like blood flow restriction training on hack squat or something, like you know what I mean, like something that's possibly the worst thing you could imagine you could do to yourself, and yet
Yeah.
in that moment, that level of pain is a dopaminergic response because we're moving towards this greater goal that we love. And yet you get you're out on the street and someone punches you in the face and gives you the same level of pain and discomfort that doesn't have any greater overarching meaning, at
Yep.
least that you're aware of. It's no fun anymore.
Hmm.
Because, I think we forget, and, I'm sure dopamine maybe gets talked about almost too much now, perhaps, but I think we forget that in a way it's simplistic and kind of dumb in
Hmm.
that it doesn't matter what the goal is, you'll get it when you work towards it.
Yep.
So if you were like I was, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, say 15, and your goal is I want to make my life hell, then guess what? You
Yep.
can get a dopamine hit making your life freaking misery and doing all the things in your life that you shouldn't. But if your goal is to elevate yourself in the correct way, well, now you get dopamine by moving towards that end goal.
Yes.
So again, you can kind of create this positive feedback loop in whatever direction you want. But it
Hmm.
comes back to the aim, the goal, the why. I don't really care what you want to call it, purpose, whatever. But that determines your entire reward structure.
Hmm.
And no one ever sits down with people and talks about like talks about how important it is to set what you're really aiming at in life. And maybe it's because it's too difficult to talk about. Maybe it's because we don't know that we need to talk about it. I don't really know, but as someone who's experienced that shift personally and hopefully is helping others graduate towards that kind of shift as well in the work that they do, I'm not sure there's anything more important, to be
Hmm.
honest with you.
No, no, I completely agree. And it's a key pillar to how we operate and the things that we do in the coaching sense, because I don't think most people have genuinely asked themselves. And I know we spoke about this on Table Talk, and I think it's a great addition to the conversations that most people genuinely don't know their why because they've never actually asked.
Mhm.
There's the concept of first and second self we kind of touched on, and I think it's a really important aspect people to understand. Most goals you set, I think, before the age of say 20, let's say 25 to be a bit more liberal with it, are realistically based on the expectations of social groups, social norms, family, parents, friends, the intended outcome that is desired for you by others.
Mhm.
Once that character, once that personality, once that person dies, and you realize that, hey, I'm here to live my life and I have all these things going on for me, and I've got a family now and a business I'm trying to grow, or friends that a different relationship, you start to realize that the goals that you want probably weren't in line with the goals that they set you or that they were intending for you to have. Like, think about how many families, especially in the high pressure world of America, you will go to college and you will get this degree and you will do this, and then this will be your corporate safe. You've got to be safe and have the corporate job, and you clock in 9 to 5. Then you can worry about the other stuff later. And then all of a sudden, 30 years have gone by and you didn't worry about the other stuff because you never actually went after it. You never set that intention to execute. And so you never actually received the dopamine. You just received a sort of validated feedback loop from friends and family, only to
Mhm.
realize that that stops anyway. So what's the point? You just end up in this humdrum job that you don't enjoy. And that, I think, is where people go wrong. They don't actually take the time to sit down and understand who they are as a person. They don't understand who they even are and what they even want. They just get told by society what they want. And that's part of our goal setting process. Is I don't just believe that goals should be set in the training world when it comes to working with a coach. I have our clients fill out what is your personal life and what is your career and business life look like. Because I believe that they're separate. You should have career and business ambitions. You should have personal ambitions. You should have training and physique ambitions. The personal side might be relationships, friendships, finding God, spirituality. It might be, taking up philosophy. It might be stoicism. It might be connecting with your wife more, being a more present father or husband. Maybe in the business world, you want to reach a six-figure promotion. You want to reach this level of business. You want to get this position. To me, all aspects of life should grow, not in harmony, but in a similar direction, and that is forward. So if I can get someone to explore what that means to them, I have a much better anchor to them to understand, like, hey, if we get this lift right, if we get this training right, if we pull down that body fat, we get you to a more confident position. Generally, we find the traits required to do X will translate into your career, into your business. You show up more confident. The shoulders are back. The chest is tall. You speak with more certainty. You have more trust in yourself because you've proven, hey, I can do a 200 kilo squat. I can definitely handle whether or not I speak to the boss and ask for that promotion. I can definitely handle whether or not I'm going to allow someone to disrespect my wife. Like, the traits and skills that we establish are not unique to that domain. And I think that's where a lot of
Mhm.
people go wrong. And so to us, a big part of what we do is having people understand you're allowed to ask for more. In fact, you should. And then once you ask for it, it is your responsibility to go after it. Ironically, that is where you're going to feel better because now you have a meaning to life beyond clocking at 9.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I'm quite interested to your take on this, actually. I think that we are such incredibly social creatures, right? We have a 20-year socialization period, give or
Mhm.
take, right? That's how social we are, in that our social environment is so complicated, it takes 2 decades to learn how it kind of works. And even then, most people probably aren't socially mature until maybe 30 or 40 anyway, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So that part of your life is important in that, and this is just how I view it, society needs to mold you into a functional social being, because no matter what your goal is, you're going to need society in some form to live it out. Doesn't matter
Mhm.
what, unless your goal is to be Tom Hanks in Castaway, like even then you need someone to drop you off on the island. So you got
Yeah.
to be able to talk to them at least. But then that's not the end. That's the here's the vehicle.
Hmm.
Here is a socially adept individual that can now survive in the long term in our infinitely complex social environment. Now, what are you going to do with the vehicle?
Hmm.
That that's up to you, but that doesn't really get talked about. It's kind of like your mum and your dad and your classmates and your friends wish these things for you, and maybe in, not in a negative way, but pressure you towards certain things. You get to a certain point where you're like, okay, I'm a functioning member of society at whatever basal level we can define that as. But now what? Like, your goal is not to be that functioning member of society. It's to be the thriving member of society. And it's to be the but thriving individual that no one else can be, because no one else has your unique
Hmm.
experiences or subset of experiences, neurology, physiology, etc. And I just don't think we talk about that. Like,
Hmm.
there's definitely more than one step to this development process, and it's not, and we all know this. Like, it's not like you talk to a 21-year-old and it's like, well, they're all figured out. Like, how often does that happen? Like, we know there's stuff missing at
Hmm.
that point, and I think a lot of this is that stuff. Like,
Hmm.
I am now able to survive. I can go in whatever direction I want, but what is that direction? Because
Hmm.
until then, it's very, I'm not going to say it's unidirectional. There's play, but it's very much pushing in a similar direction for everyone. But then it's like being dropped in the middle of the desert with nothing for miles around you in any direction. It's like, well, pick a direction and walk.
Hmm.
And all directions could lead to something great and all directions could lead to something terrible. But the one thing that you know is that you don't go in a direction, you get nowhere. And I
Hmm.
think that's a little bit where people are kind of stuck. It's kind of perhaps paralyzed by the options in front of them. But those options in front of you start to diminish massively once you really start asking these questions of yourself. Like, what are the things that you do that when you lose time? Like,
Hmm.
what are you doing when you do those things? When do you envision the best possible version of yourself, or the individuals in society that you look up to? When you peel them back, what are the things they actually all share in common? Because, for example, like, there's a reason we can all watch sports that we've never played and really have never experienced, and yet can enjoy them massively,
Yep.
because, like, we love the pursuit of a quest and the
Yes.
successful
It's the
pursuits.
hero's journey.
It is, and we love the capabilities and the character traits that underline the succession of that quest. And it's like, well, which of those are most important to you? And, there's going to be differing answers there depending on someone's neurology and how they're kind of wired, for want of a better way of putting it. And it's like, cool, now that we have these kind of character traits that we think are implicitly important, at least as far as you're concerned in your perception of the world, and maybe we have this small subset of things where, well, guess what? When you do these things, you're never self-conscious, and this is your flow state, and this is where you're in your happy place, whatever you want to call it. Well, then how do we mix those?
Hmm.
How do we how do we strive for those overarching character traits, which, as you've alluded to, feed into absolutely everything, within the realm of where you find yourself naturally interested? Because, and maybe this doesn't get talked about enough either, like, you don't get that much choice in what you're interested in.
Hmm.
Like, it's, you really don't. Like, we like to think we do, but, like, if that was our choice, all of us would be infinitely interested in paying our taxes, like high school chemistry and whatever else would be deemed like useful for us to do at the time. But we're not. Like we have these things that just draw us in, and that's where we find this kind of flow state. And I don't, there's probably a way that you can pursue that and be a betterment to yourself, your friends, your family, the larger society. It might not be society's typical path. It might be incredibly difficult. There might be a lot of delayed gratification. But I think there is that path, whatever we want to call it. I think that path is available for everyone. But that's why you can't answer like what's the meaning of life or what's the
Yeah.
purpose of life,
Yeah.
because that path is different for every single person.
Yes.
And you can argue the perhaps the only meta true answer to that question is to find it and then
Yeah. Find
pursue
it for
it.
you.
Yeah, you know, like there isn't, I can't say the same thing to you or anyone else for that. And also, no one else can tell you what it is. You know,
Yeah.
like you're going to be in those moments and you're going to understand. Like, I don't know about you, but like, for example, there are some mornings when I'm like doing my check-ins and you take a client, you take this information that they've given you based on their week, and you're looking at their protocol and your head is you're spinning around every piece of knowledge that you know about what can make this person's life even better, or how do
Hmm.
you respond to that subset of data and make it better. And like that's for me, that's flow state. Like that
Hmm.
time does not exist at that point. Like that when I feel like I'm doing that well and I'm doing it to a level where like I'm challenged, like it's right on the edge of my knowledge set. That is as close to flow state as I can ever personally exist in that, I think. But you know, that moment for me, that makes me very glad that I'm a coach and I decided to coach people the way that I do because I can do that. You know, if I was,
Hmm.
and I mean this in no derogatory term to the individuals who do this, but if I was a personal trainer on a gym floor who was kind of, you know, counting sets and reps, like doing that kind of standard practice, and again, I don't mean that in a derogative sense, I would never get that feeling. And I
Yeah.
would probably say to myself, I'm not sure if coaching is for me.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's just that style of coaching isn't for me. But I never would have discovered that that's how I want to work if I didn't have this little inkling. And we can argue about what that little inkling is in your head in reality, you know, whether it's God or your conscience or whatever. But you just had to like listen to it and like, no, go this way, do it
Hmm.
this way. And like, yeah, people will tell you that's not how it's done. And money, it's going to take a lot of time. You're not going to make as much money or whatever.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter, right? Like when you just follow that, I think, and you know, kind of backtracking on myself here, I think when you trust that you are setting your sight appropriately on the right goal or the right
Hmm.
aim, you can then trust your conscience or your gut, whatever you want to call it, because it's going to point you towards that goal or that aim. Whereas if your goal or your aim is not set very well, then I think you can't trust your intuition because it's going to be pulling you towards the wrong thing. But I think people need to go with their gut more, providing they've done the groundwork.
Yeah. And to kind of touch back on your point, I think it's not only part of the human journey, but it's something that I think is an obligation, if not responsibility, to at least explore or figure out why you were here and try and
Mhm.
understand your meaning to life. Understand what that meaning is going to be and what it's going to provide you based on how you can contribute to the greater good of the world and those who come after us. There has been a lot of people, a lot of death, a lot of sacrifice and struggle to get to the position that we currently are in society, in the world. And what an opportunity is to then contribute to the next level that comes afterwards. And I find that
Mhm.
if you don't have anything, at least looking at how something that you do have can provide to others is a great way to
Mhm.
purpose that, to direct that. And it's something that I truly believe that most people don't know, they haven't asked, but one and part of the reason why they don't ask is because it's a very scary thing to then suddenly realize why you're here. Perhaps you're further along than you realize, and now you got to change direction, or perhaps it's now lifted a veil of fake perceived happiness that you don't actually have.
Mhm.
Maybe it's now brought to attention, hey, I'm supposed to be doing something completely different. And it's very scary to do that because once you ask, and we have this as our one of our intake forms, is um, a question that I try to prompt in many different ways is, am I capable of more? And that's the individual, not me. That's the person we're working with, the person we're getting to. And the reason why I think that's scary for a lot of people is because once you lift that veil, once you ask that question, it then removes any excuse as to not knowing, and it removes any doubt that you don't have a direction, and it places
Mhm.
all ownership and responsibility on you to make it happen. And that's a very scary place for people to be in. Right now, we can blame society for the cost of living. We can blame society for, the outcomes we're facing. We can blame society for, in my case, the car accident that I had, the guy ran a red light and he was speeding. I can be
Mhm.
miserable. I can blame all of those things. But I knew at the age of 21, I was meant to do more than sit in a bed and complain about my sore back and, have this injury and I let that define my life. So taking that obligation, taking that responsibility, I asked, what am I capable of? Well, I can go do my physio, I can go do my rehab, I can go do my strengthening, I can go to my court cases, I can go to my lawyer appearances, I can do all these things to move this forward, make progress. After the fact, what comes next? I can do those things. I am meant to do more than sit here and play victim to my life. And I think that's a very scary place for people to be because there's no longer anyone to blame. And so it's kind of a hard position to put people in where they have to ask, but I truly believe it is our responsibility to ask the question because then it becomes our responsibility and we have to take ownership of what comes after that. And that is where, I find these great goals around physiques, training, performance, it becomes such a powerful vehicle. In the worst case that you don't know you're capable of anything, we can, and this is a really good, I think, pivot to the training side of self-efficacy and individualization is if you have nothing else going on in life, you have nothing else happening, no other direction that you know that you want to work on. At the worst case, can I make myself physically better at something? And that
Mhm.
is probably at the fundamental level of why I like comp prep and I like bodybuilding. It's less about whether or not you win the trophy. No, you're wrong. I don't allow people on stage that are, 20 weeks out and it's just because it feels good and I just want to be up there. And like part of the growth benefit that comes from doing the hard thing is that you actually put in the work and earn the right to be there and do the thing that you're doing.
Yes.
That to me is why high level physical pursuit of any kind, it could be martial art, could be a strength training, it could be a meet, it could be a stage, it could be high performance sport. If you have nothing else going on in life, directing yourself towards the development and physical pursuit is at least something that gives you a route that you can follow until other things start to grow. And that to me, I'm very curious on your take because I know that that sort of approach is similar in how you guys do things, but
Mhm.
I'm curious on your take there because I think, sort of wrapping up that sort of conversation
Yeah, sure.
is it's part of that responsibility to ask that. And once you ask it, if you have nothing else, like I don't know what I want, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I have, what gifts I have, the bar's going to tell you. Getting to that level of body fat is going to tell you. Getting to,
Mhm.
taking 30% body fat off your body because you've just been a gluttonous monster for the last 20 years. You know, reducing hedonism to physical development that you can then show others around you that it's possible. Whatever it might be, it's a great tool and vehicle to make that happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, you'll have more experience here than I do. But, is there anything worse than dealing with a bodybuilder who's a couple of weeks out who has absolutely nothing else going on in their life? Like they're just clock watching for the next plate of egg whites and broccoli or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
is anyone more miserable in existence than that person, right? So, physical, the pursuit of something physical in of itself is not the answer. But what it does do, in my opinion, is it gives us this wonderful kind of walled garden to play around in where the entropy of is considerably less than in the rest of the infinitely complex world, and also generally speaking, the costs or the repercussions are considerably lower for failure. Like, barring horrible life-ending injuries, like it's probably safer to play around with your life values and your work ethic in the gym than it is
Hmm.
elsewhere, right?
Hmm.
But I think when we start looking at these physical pursuits, I always start wondering why we have started to separate the idea of like cognitive and physical development. Like, why
Yeah.
does the Neanderthal lifter exist as a trope now?
Hmm.
Like, if you go back to all of the really great philosophies and cultures, whether it's Greek or Roman or like Shaolin or samurai, like they were all students
Hmm.
and they were all, they were all extremely well versed in a variety of topics and well educated because that's what was expected of a warrior, for
Hmm.
example. And you're like, even like Shaolin, for example, like that was started because it's like, well, if we're going to meditate all day and become these weak little things, we got to learn how to defend ourselves. We have to be physically strong so that we can defend our virtues at worst case scenario. So, every great culture, in my opinion, has kind of paired them together. And then we just seem to have almost gone the opposite way. And I don't have the answer for why we've done that. Maybe it's like a safety thing. Like it's, it's easier to just pursue one thing than two great things, perhaps. I don't know. But I think it's time that jacked stoic trope
Hmm.
were to return to our culture. And I think, and for us, I think the training, what, and again, it doesn't matter what it is, as you said it, I really don't care either. It's more about teaching you the lessons that it can, that also life is trying to teach you, but much more abstractly. Like, there's going to be good and bad days, but the work still needs to be done.
Hmm.
There's going to be delayed gratification, and you know what? There are going to be times when you're actually going to do everything right and it's still not going to go your way.
Yes.
And the only way to get past that is to keep doing everything right until you do get the thing that you want at the end. And there's going to be times where you feel that you are completely out of your depth, and that's probably where you should be. And that's probably what you should keep pushing into. It's funny, the first ever international seminar I did was with Christian Thibodeau. And he at this point has been doing it for 20 years or whatever he's been doing at that point. And I'm there nervous as hell, as you can imagine. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, "Man, I wish an asteroid would hit this building right now." And what he meant by that was like he gets so nervous before he goes up there and presents that like he'd almost do anything to not do it until he gets kind of in the flow of it. And
Yep.
I've had the same conversation with Dave, and it's like, talk about imposter syndrome or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, that thing that literally everyone has." It's like, well, yeah, I guess. But like the weight room teaches us that when we get to that point where you're like, "Oh man, I'm not so sure," that's where you should be.
Hmm.
Precise, we spoke about Vygotsky and the realm of proximal development and all this type of thing, but it offers this wonderful environment where we can get in that zone where you can look at it as like left hemisphere and right hemisphere. You can look at positive emotion, negative emotion system, whatever. They're both firing in this beautifully balanced place where you are on your A game, but you are not naive enough to think that there isn't risk.
Hmm.
And that is the absolute, I don't care what anyone says, that is the absolute best place to be as a human being. Like, we are hardwired to try and find that. And when we can't find it, we'll do absolutely terrible things to try and find something close to it. And we can call it meaning, we can call it flow state, we can call it whatever you want. But if you want to question the importance of it, just sit down and ask yourself, why do you even have a perception of it in the first place?
Hmm.
Like, why can you perceive meaning? Like, why can you perceive flow state? Like, we had to evolve to perceive that sensation. It would be like saying that the sensation of touch or heat or something is not important. It's like, no, that's pretty important. And if you
Yep.
don't think it is, then you just haven't been put in a
Yeah.
scenario where you've been forced to
You haven't grabbed a
realize.
hot stove yet.
Correct, right? But so we have an inbuilt sense meaning meter. I don't know what else you want to call it, right?
Hmm.
And for those who are at that point that we kind of already alluded to, where you have thousands of directions around you and you have no idea which one is better or worse, what you can do is ask yourself, when do I ever feel like I do in the midst of a hard workout? Like, I would suppose I would sum it up as, this sucks, but there is absolutely nowhere else I would rather be.
Yep. Yep.
Do you get what I'm just like
Yep.
that
Yep.
beautiful, almost balance of pain and pleasure type thing. And
Yep.
when you're like, oh, well, why is and maybe this is it, it's like, why is the gym my happy place? Maybe that's the best question it can make you ask, like, what is it? And hopefully you kind of realize then that it's that balance, that zone where you are being challenged to the correct amount to put the most possible things in your favor to make you develop in some way. Doesn't matter towards what angle, just some form of development. And then it's, well, where else can you find that? Like,
Hmm.
well, now you know the feeling, and we're all aware that it exists. Like anyone who's ever done a true, like a one rep max that was actually 100% knows precisely what that feels like. Like, time stays still, everything flows instantly. There's no you or anything else. There's just that moment. Well, you can get that in the rest of your life, and maybe it's when you're, you know, playing soccer with your children or whatever. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, or hanging out with your wife doing it. But like, if you're really lucky, you might find that in some other day-to-day activities, or in even perhaps one really small facet of, say, your job. And you're like, well, if that's the part of my job that actually means something to me, where else can I get that? Or how can I get more of that? And all of a sudden, the paths will start kind of opening up to you because now you have a real aim. Your aim is when I do my job, when I'm doing X part of my job, or whatever, hanging out with certain individuals, like having good conversations with yourself, I feel this sensation that I am now aware of. I want to strive towards more of that.
Hmm.
And there once you have that, I think you're pretty well set once you make that realization. But I think then beyond that, the training itself is just this constant objective feedback loop where you get to know whether you're doing the right things and serving the right master, because nothing great, and I think this is a big part of why we still love physical endeavors now, right? We live in a world where there's more convenience than ever. Like AI is making us wonder whether something is real or not. And I'm not against AI, it's just the reality, right? But like, I don't know, 5% body fat on a person in front of you, like AI can't do that.
Hmm.
A 950, 800 meter, like you can't fake that.
Hmm.
Like it's one of the few bastions in our society where like it cannot be faked. And it has to be earned, and there is no shortcut. Like you can talk PEDs and whatever all you want. I don't care. Anyone who wants to use that argument has not hung around with people that have used them, or doesn't even understand the premise of them, right? Like the people who are doing amazing things would be doing amazing things without them and are working no less hard because of them if they are using them. And to disappoint people, a lot of the time they're not, or they're using much, much less than you think. But
Hmm.
that physical outcome, whether it's like a fantastic play in an NFL game, the 5% body fat, the 1,000 pound squat, that is the unfakeable end result of all of these wonderful physical traits repeated day after day after day, with hardship and heartache and disappointment, all of that in the mix. And that's what you get, the tip of the iceberg at the top. And that's why we love it.
Hmm.
And I just don't think we don't know that's why we love it, but that's why we love it.
Yeah.
And the training can give us that for ourselves. And I think that's a really powerful thing to give a person. Like you are capable of working hard. You are capable of delayed gratification. Like this, and I mean this kind of tongue in cheek, but also not in a negative way. Like a lot of people are kind of like this horrible dysfunctional monster in terms of neurochemistry and the way of life right now. And that's, we can argue fault or whatever, but it's irrelevant. Here is where you're at. And maybe your life is hell. Like it's chaos in every single direction. But then if that is the case, then the gym might be like this tiny little organized square where
Hmm.
like, and there are probably so many people going to nod their head when I say it's like, doesn't matter how horrible and chaotic life is outside the gym. You go in the gym, you got your 90 minutes, whatever it is. That's your time.
Hmm.
Gravity is still gravity. 45 pounds is 45 pounds. And you are going to get tested appropriately, we hope. And when all your life is chaos, that might be the anchor point in your life where it's like, this is the place where I can hone my skills safely and get them to the point where I can actually start to take action in the rest of my life. Because it might be that right now you do not have the traits needed to unfuck your life. And I apologize for the French, right? But it might be a case of you can upskill yourself and you can train them in the right way, and maybe the gym is where you do that. I think we mentioned this on the table talk, but no one ever talks about training virtues.
Hmm.
Like we want big biceps, we want to be able to run faster, we want a seven-figure bank account, but like you have to train discipline.
Hmm.
You have to train charity and care. Like these are things that you have to put yourself in those situations and actively choose them if you want to reinforce them and build that skill. And while the gym is a wonderful place for you to do that, like the day that you don't want to train is probably the best day you can train. And I know that might open a dangerous rabbit hole for some, but for the other 98%, that couldn't be more true. Absolutely, because it's the ingraining of the habit of pushing aside the short-term gratification for the potential of what you could be in the longer term if you're willing to do the hard things.
Well, I think it also, besides the wrap up of that amazing conversation in general, one of the things that training and doing something hard gives us is, you know, you start to appreciate the traits and virtues in other people. Now, what does that lead to, right? So I understand that in order for me to get another 10 kilos of stage mass is going to take a lot of work. So when I see another athlete then that is getting after it and doing their thing and they've reached this pinnacle, suddenly the chip on my shoulder is gone. Suddenly the jealousy, the naivety, the ignorance, the lust for and the hedonism around that, like, I want this because it gives me money or power or fame. Suddenly that sort of it's stripped away and it's purely just a moment of appreciation and respect for someone else that got after it, someone else that proved that I am capable of achieving this thing through sheer hard work, consistency, discipline, application. Now, where else does that cross over? Well, suddenly, when I see an Elon Musk, when I see a Bezos, now you can argue about the morality of them having this much money or that much money. I don't care. The fact is, it is a representation of the ability of the work that they put in, the effort they put in over time to solve real world problems to try and make people better. Now, you can argue whether or not their perspective of what makes the life better is up for debate, but the fact is that was their intention. So now the chip on my shoulder goes away about, hey, this guy's $1 trillion. Now I look and go, okay, this person's individual directed and dedicated himself to a singular craft to the point of simply sleep and wake. That's it. It was do the work, go to sleep, wake up, do the work, go to sleep. How can I take that concept and apply it to myself? What can I take that from and learn? And suddenly I'm less defensive, I'm less arrogant, less egotistical, less emotional, reactive. Suddenly I'm intentional, I'm taking action, I'm forthright, and I'm forthcoming in what I want. I've stated what I want, and I'm saying it's mine to go after. I'm going to get it. There is very few times in the world, short of you being a megalomaniac and using that to try and take over the world, there is very few times where that doesn't lead to a positive outcome for you. You are less vindictive, you are less emotional, you're less reactive, you're less defensive, you're less egotistical. It is more about who you can become and the traits that you recognize and appreciate than whether or not someone else has the thing that you want. Suddenly, you look at that and say, you know what? I'm not jealous of Michael Jordan for being 6X and playing center and winning 6 championships. Suddenly, I am looking at that and going, man, that guy dedicated his entire life to a single craft. How do I not appreciate that? Well, now suddenly I can see that in the boss that I didn't respect previously. Suddenly I can look at that and say, hey, that boss was willing to give up most of his life to try and grow this company to make an impact in whatever world that they're in. Yeah, some people just want capital for capital's sake, but there are a lot of people trying to operate in a way where it gives back to the world through what they're doing. You, by sheer training, by putting yourself in that position, by recognizing how much hard work goes into the thing, suddenly the excuses of cheating, of nepotism, of bias, of social benefactory, removing that thing, like those things suddenly get stripped away because you realized at the end of it, at the crux of it, is purely hard work and the ability to be consistent and apply discipline and build those traits. You wouldn't recognize that if you didn't get under the bar. You don't recognize that if you don't get under the lift, if you don't hit that failure set, if you don't go to 3% body fat, if you don't go to, the highest level that you can possibly push yourself. And again, that doesn't have to be our goals. Like I'm not sitting here telling you have to do 1,000 pound squat. I'm not telling you have to be a bodybuilder, but that physical pursuit enables you to see a what is required to achieve a goal, how long you have to work towards getting that thing, and what it feels like once you achieve it. You don't want to take that away from someone else. You don't want to be the
Yeah.
reason why someone else feels unvalidated or invalidated by it.
Mm.
You don't want to be the reason why someone else has to defend the thing that they did because now you appreciate it. And that to me is where training becomes such a powerful tool for self efficacy, emotional regulation, delayed gratification, forward thinking, goal orientation. It becomes a direction in life that allows you to then pivot off once you see something else. And you might get to that point where, you know what, I don't want to be the 3% 100 kilo bodybuilder anymore. Or that, that turns out that wasn't the goal. What the goal was to see who I could become in pursuit of it. And it was to see who I could become along the way. And perhaps now I've sort of reached that and realized that I'm capable of that, but it was about martial arts instead, or it was
Yeah.
about my business instead, or it was about my relationship instead. And all of that stemmed from I have nothing. Let's dedicate everything that I have then towards training, towards my physical mastery, towards that level of self development, because it's likely going to develop me in other areas of life. And that's where I find, and springboarding off your point and the way you guys view self efficacy and training, I think it's such an important tool for people that if you have no direction, it's at least a starting point or at least a starting ground for you to push from. It's at least the port from which you can sail to find the next destination.
Mhm.
And at least in forward action, you can make an assessment of this is great. What's the next thing? Or this isn't for me. What's the next thing? This is where I
Mhm.
want to head to. But if you stay at the port, there is no There is no ship that is designed to stay anchored. And that to me is like is the vehicle of training and physical mastery. And that's why I think, this conversation is so important, is because people don't really appreciate it's always looked at, like you said, going back to the culture and history. Every great culture, every great philosophy has had a form of physical mastery in and amongst it. But today's day and age is, well, both you and me are complete contradiction to that statement. I am studying clinical
Yeah.
psychology. You have a degree in marine biology. We're also absolute meatheads that love training, pushing ourselves, and coaching other people.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
part of that is what makes us, for lack of egotism and sounding arrogant, great coaches.
Hmm.
We see that the thing that you are doing is not just the thing that you are doing. It is something that is going to give you meaning, direction, and purpose. When I have a client come to me with something like that, holy shit, I will move the world to help them get their goal. I will be up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I don't care. I will be up at the crack of dawn and fly to America if I have to in order to make that thing possible for someone, because I know that that is going to change their life. And if that's where my legacy dies, then I know for a fact that at least one person is better off because of what I did.
Yeah, and I think then what you were saying, I really just kind of pushed this home for me. The reason that I think those things need to be blended together with regards to the, should we say, the cognitive and the physical world,
Hmm.
both elevating is, as we've kind of already alluded to, you're chasing the same thing.
Hmm.
It's, that meaning, that balance of positive and negative, the challenge, whatever you want to call it. So if you want to be the best person you can be and also have the most fulfillment that you can have, well, then you need to be challenged and chase challenge everywhere. So, like, there's not that much difference, I presume, for you between, let's say, trying to understand a new principle or a research study that is right on the limit of your ability to grasp it in terms of a knowledge base. There's probably not that much different to that between a workout that you're not entirely sure you're going to get through, or a lift or a set that you're not entirely going to get through. It's the same thing. And you can get there in the gym, you can get there in your studies, you can get there in your day-to-day life even. Like, next time that you're out and you're at freaking Walmart or something, so I don't know what the Aussie equivalent of Walmart is, but whatever that is, right? Like, next time you're like looking over and there's someone struggling to get something off the top shelf and you really can't be bothered, and like, the better version of you would go and help her or push the trolley away or what, doesn't matter, right? Well, there's your challenge. Like, yeah, sure. It's not the kind of challenge that people are going to have party poppers going off for, sure.
Hmm.
But every facet of your life has this direction that feeds into the better version of yourself. And,
Hmm.
that the thing that lies behind all of those facets of life at their absolute pinnacle would be what is stereotypically referred to as God, I suppose. Like the ultimate good, regardless of context. But like, you can, whatever that ultimate good is, you can strive towards it during your workout, in your workplace, how you interact
Hmm.
with your partner, how you interact as a, in society, even how you talk to yourself, perhaps. There's always a way to pursue that. And I think when you, it's not an easy realization to make, I'm sure, but when you realize that, you're like, cool, now I am infinitely challenged. And
Hmm.
that's not a bad thing. That's a really, really good thing. And that's because challenge brings fulfillment, and
Hmm.
provided it's an adequate level of challenge, should we say. Like, you don't get any fulfillment from doing something where success is guaranteed, and you don't really get any fulfillment from getting your ass handed to you 100% of the time either. But there's going to be scenarios in every facet of your life where you can find that zone, that thing, and you can just get that tiny bit better. And, as you've already kind of said there, I think the gym and training, or whatever it is that does it for you as an individual, is the best gateway drug to go down that path by an absolute mile. Because worst case, you get healthier, and you, maybe it doesn't quite take you there, but you get healthier. And then maybe because you're healthy, you've got a bit more energy in the other facets of your life. And maybe you find some of these life lessons over there instead, because you're not feeling miserable all the time. But I think the one thing it really does do, if someone gets into some form of physical training and they start making progress, well, now you're walking uphill. And humans are made to walk uphill. As you said, like, no ship is meant to be anchored permanently. And what you'll find is people who are walking uphill productively never look for a way to pull other people downhill. They look at other people going uphill and thinking, well, that person's 3 steps ahead of me. How do I get there?
Hmm.
What are they doing that I'm not doing, for example, Whereas when we don't have anything in our life that's pulling us uphill or pushing us uphill, and we're walking downhill, well, then you're looking to play the victim. You're looking to drag others down with you. You're looking to make your life worse, perhaps in a direct or a very indirect way. So even if it does nothing more than break the cycle and just make you realize, oh, there is some upward momentum to be had from life. Let's go ahead and strive towards that. Well, then it can become the catalyst, kind of akin to that Matthew principle, where now the spiral slowly slows down and starts chugging the other way. And then, who knows what you're capable of beyond that point. So if you're lacking direction, sometimes the gym can be the easiest thing to be like, well, I know what I need to do to be physically better. Like that, what we're talking about here is very abstract. It might be difficult for some people to get their head like, how do I be a better human? Like that's a really hard, like
Yeah.
philosophy and a religion kind of exists to try and answer that question and
Yes.
is still failing for a lot of people, right? But you can probably say, what do I need to do to be healthier, a better physical individual, right? So it starts orienting your aim upwards there, and then once you kind of get that ball rolling, well, then all the good stuff can start to happen beyond that point, in my opinion. And I just think it's for most, it's going to be the absolute lowest hanging fruit that they have available in that regard.
Yeah, I think too with in regards to the yeah, there's a conversation people have where, and I do agree to a degree that
Mhm.
training is not therapy, and it's often people like, oh,
Mhm.
this is my therapy, and I think there's contextual nuances that people miss out of that statement. When you get the very,
Mhm.
liberal left in the sense of like, no, you need to go to therapy, and not to make it political, but simply where that sort of position sits on the spectrum, you get those sort of people that are like, no, you need to go to therapy and express your emotions. This is an expression. It's like, well, actually, who are you to define expression? Who are you to define what that form of emotional expression is? Because I tell you what, when I'm under a 240 kilo hack squat, 300 kilo hack squat, I'm expressing something. There is definitely some expression going on. But when I think it's used in that context, it's not in the statement that this is avoidance of therapy. I'm not doing this
Mhm.
instead of therapy. It is that to a degree, this is the greatest form of therapy that I can understand, where I'm going to find meaning, purpose, and a sense of fulfillment, or at least direction. Now, I can go to therapy and sit on the couch and go through my Freudian psychology, and I can have someone try to bring up my childhood. But at the end of the day, and this is where I'm more of an Aslam, sorry, not Aslam. I always get it wrong. There was two people that got conflicted during the period of Freud. There was what essentially became almost humanistic psychology, and there
Mhm.
was essentially the Freudian scope of psychology. And Freud kind of won. He kind of won the theme and the narrative. But essentially, it was this context of past trauma, history, and experiences that define you as a person that we need to address. And then there was this take, or this school of thought, that was essentially became humanistic psychology, or what we might call positive psychology now, as an evolution, and that is self-actualization, forward momentum, and forward action. And that is
Mhm.
that, I can sit there on the couch and dwell on my feelings, emotions, and experiences. I guarantee you, I get nothing out of talking to someone about whether or not I was hit by a car. It simply is.
Mhm.
It's not up for debate. It's not a subjective thing. It's not going to change my emotional state. It simply is. It is a neutral position. It is part of my history. But how I carry myself and act onward from that is a much different, a much greater conversation, because that is going to impact the rest of my life, not what happened in the past of my life. And that to me is where, the concept of training is not therapy probably needs at least a review by the kind of people that say it, because for us, it's not that it's a therapy, it's a therapeutic process, but it's also a meaning making and exploratory process. And
Mhm.
is that not also part of therapy? If you understand the therapy models, if you understand clinical therapy and the different forms of practice, meaning making is a big part of therapy. Purpose
Mhm.
establishment, goal orientation, what is the goal of this? All of those things are part of the therapeutic practice. And so it's not simply that we are excusing the lack of therapy and saying that just because I touched the bar, I'm now getting medical treatment. To me, I think the underlying meaning that people are missing in that conversation is that it's actually giving me something to work towards, trying to establish purpose in my life. And to a degree, it's allowing me to find meaning under a high degree of pressure. That regardless of where I am previously, regardless of who I was or what happened in my life, this present moment is what matters, because that bar is going to crush me if it doesn't. And that's where I
No,
think that
yeah.
conversation sort of sits.
Yeah, and it's a tough one, isn't it? Because saying training can be therapy does open up the door to the minority to abuse it. But
Yes.
in that point, I would say it's not therapy. I would say
Yes.
it's probably hedonism. And I know
Exactly.
that all too well because I've been there. But the idea that can training be therapy is, I think it's not even a question because,
Hmm.
I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or anything like that, but I presume when you get someone who's not in a pretty good state, some of the questions you start asking is like, well, what do you, where in your life do you feel that you have fulfillment? Where in your life do you feel happy? Where in your life do you feel at your best? And, if that is painting or whatever it might be, then painting is therapy. But why is that intrinsically any different from lifting a barbell? Like it
Hmm.
fundamentally at the physiological level in terms of what it does for their neurochemistry, the perspective of the universe and all of that, there's absolutely no reason that they can't be the exact same thing for that individual in the right context. And, I'm sure there is a hedonistic way of self-sabotaging yourself via painting if you really want to find it. And you can sit in that chair until you've got sores and you don't eat and you don't drink and you refuse to go until your paint runs out or whatever. Like you could do this. It's just, I think it's easier to do
Hmm.
with a barbell or whatever. Like
Hmm.
it's easier to run until your feet bleed, and all that type of thing, and you're riddled with arthritis or, tendinopathy or whatever else, like that might be easier to hurt yourself with than perhaps some other endeavors like singing or playing an instrument. But I would argue that it possibly has even greater payoffs, like, and if you're playing, unless you're destined to be the next Jimi Hendrix, like guitar is probably not going to do that much more for you beyond giving you that kind of fulfillment and purpose. Whereas if we're talking training, then we get genuinely into the physical nature of the organism and being
Hmm.
healthier and all the things that that can do in the long term on top of the psychological aspect. So maybe the risks are higher, but I'd also argue that the rewards are considerably higher if we look at training from that element. And for me, like I really enjoy the kind of the Shaolin philosophy of it in that you can't train the mind until you train the body and vice versa.
Hmm.
And the way to the one that you want to train is through the opposite and so on and so forth. And whether it's true or not, I don't really care. The point is that it makes you do both.
Hmm.
And I don't think you can be your best in either of those fields unless you are at your best. Like there's a reason that, people like Jeff Bezos and people like that got started getting into shape and getting fitter and stronger because it's like maybe I don't care about having a six pack or whatever it might be, but like if I want to make that next $1 billion or whatever it is, like I need to feel good, I need to be driven, I need to sleep well, I need to be able to focus for long periods of time. So maybe the way for my mind to improve is in the physical over here. And then, I think maybe we don't look at the reverse enough. Like I think there's a lot of individuals in the physical side of the industry who are should we say the meatheads, the trainers, and I don't use that term in a negative way there at all, that maybe aren't asking themselves like, can I be my best physically if I'm not psychologically?
Hmm.
Like if you were an NBA player or a professional, athlete in some regard, they would that question would be getting asked of you all the time. Like there's a
Hmm.
reason teams have sports psychologists and all of
Correct.
this. It's like doesn't matter how physically impressive you are if your head's not in the game, like you may as well not be there. But I think us as, should we say, amateur athletes, or whatever we want to look at ourselves as here in the endeavor of weightlifting and bodybuilding, we don't ask that question of ourselves
Hmm.
enough. I don't think, like, because we don't have our sports psychologist on staff, we're not really asking that question. But maybe being a competitive bodybuilder is the absolute most important thing for you in your life. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely not. But are you at your best everywhere else in a way that facilitates you actually reaching that upper ceiling? Because
Hmm.
I don't know about you, man, but like there's only so hard miserable people will work.
Hmm.
Like, and it is at that moment in time, it is everything they can give. Like there's no debate about that. But what if there was more to give? Like the best, highest performers are the ones that are fulfilled elsewhere. So again, we end up coming to around full circle to this whole like anything is everything type approach, but it really is that important. It's one of those like one plus one is kind of five scenarios. And I'm going to really super backtrack here to a point you were making earlier about goal setting, just because the Shaolin comment reminded me of it. But the way that I heard it summed up that possibly did it the best for me on a personal level was the path is the goal, but without the goal, there is no path.
Yes.
Which of course sounds counterintuitive. So you think about it a little bit more. It's like, well, the journey is the important bit, but unless you have the thing you're aiming at, there isn't a journey to anything. So what are you
Yes.
aiming at? Right. And it's like, well, because you've got an aim, now you get to have a journey, and the journey is the bit where you grow. And, that's why we love all the stories about people going on quests. That's why The Hobbit is such a great book or
Well,
film or whatever, and things like that.
given
It's
given
like,
what's in cinema right now, like the Odyssey is
mm,
literally that name, right? That is the fundamental journey story that people like.
yeah,
This is why people got so caught up in its creation right now, is because it's such a fundamental, pivotal Western story and Western
yeah,
philosophy story. The man had to return home after 10 years at war, 10 years of battle. I'm a victor of the War of Troy, but my journey now is home to see my wife and my family, to reconnect and sort of get back to who I was, only to end on this perilous journey over 10 years that he was punished by everyone and everything in order to get there. It wasn't that he returned home, it was what was the story along the way that made Odysseus who he was, or explored who he
mm,
was, or maybe he had to change his ways slightly. That
mm,
concept, as you stated, is the goal. That is the point. At the end of the day, we're all going to end up, frail, brittle, and broken. And it's going to be whether you died in perfect bill of health, but suddenly it was just like my time's up and I'm done. At the end of the day,
yeah,
we are going to all dissolve at some point into the ground, and that's going to be it. And whether you believe there's a post spiritual world outside of that, whether you believe that is it, and it's just simply this is the chance that I get, I I truly think that the sense of fulfillment and positive experience and happiness, quote unquote, joy, has to come in the pursuit of the thing, not reaching the thing, because reaching the thing is a singular destination. It can't be a sustained state. You cannot simply sustain the experience of, like, I know when I give this example. I've played in pretty decent levels of rugby league. I played at Suncorp Stadiums, one of the greatest football stadiums in the world. I've played grand finals. I've played, got received mans of the matches. I swear to people, I've never experienced a flow state like the season I just had when it came to getting on stage. I I was coming up to nationals. I was backstage. It was literally the pinnacle of all the work, right? Like the day was done. Everything was ticked off. Did not miss a box for 12, 18 straight months. Every single thing culminated to this moment and this event. But I knew, because I'd done all of the work, that I was present with my amazing fiance, that I was present with a great team of staff and coaching, and a circle, a team of other athletes, that we were all in this experience together to share it. When we look at self-determination, that was the pinnacle of things, right? Relatedness, connected, competence, and autonomy. I decided to be there and embrace this suffering and get through it. I decided every single day to wake up and push it. I was around great people and supported by amazing people, and I displayed that I could handle the thing and do it because I'd placed in the previous shows. Alongside of that, I was at this challenge state, but also a sense of peace. There was nothing left for me to do. There was nothing left for me to chase. I simply couldn't change a single thing right now except get on stage. So why be at a state of anxiety or arousal that doesn't improve my benefit or benefit my performance? And that was this insane state of flow and presence and happiness, but it was because of those things that I was able to experience it. I can't physically sustain that experience of joy and happiness. I can seek it and work towards it, but it was the hardship journey along the prep. And there was so many things that happened during that prep that make the experience more meaningful. But I can't sustain that feeling backstage before even getting the medal, before even getting on the stage. It's simply that pre moment experience where I was just at a bliss and a relaxation where everyone's frantic and chaotic. I'm just sitting with my headphones on, just chilling, listening to some David Goggins, some motivational music, and just some there was like stoic philosophy I was playing in there as well, just like
mhm,
listening to it on audio. And I'm just chilling and relaxing. I'm like, holy shit, this is it. Like I've worked 35 years to experience this, and I don't even care if I win. But that,
yeah,
because I didn't care if I won, ironically, produced arguably my best look because I was psychologically stable, I was emotionally sound, I was in the moment. But to wrap it to the point was the the joy and happiness I felt there could not be maintained for the rest of my life. Right? It's going
mhm,
to require the next level for me to push towards to be able to experience that positivity. And across that prep gave me so many like minor moments or experiences like that, and then it culminated into this big moment. But if I purely go out on that hedonistic route of seeking that all the time, every time, well, that's where drug addiction comes in. That's where hedonistic approach is coming, where I'm trying to solve that in real time and acutely in the short term with, you know, other or external pleasures. Because of the hardship, the sacrifice, the journey to the hard thing, to the outcome, which was getting on the national stage, I was able to experience that. And that's where I think a lot of people don't understand, appreciate and this is where, we go back to teaching the PPO model, which is process, performance, and outcome goals. Once the outcome goal is set, it's almost ignored. There's basically no reason to talk about it. everything now is about the processes and the performances that make the outcome possible. And that is where you are going to find the most joy, happiness, and success, because it's in the each day striving towards the outcome that, as you sort of said there, in that sort of that phrase, is the the goal is the journey, but there is no journey without that outcome goal. And
Mhm.
that could not encompass dopaminergic reward feedback loops any better when we actually
Yeah.
understand what's going on.
And I think that state you described there, which I'm very happy you got to experience that. That we go back to why are things like physical prowess perhaps valued in our society? And I think scenarios like that, when you hear that, where I think there's a state of peace or tranquility, perhaps, that can only be reached when everything, absolutely everything that you could possibly do has been done.
Hmm.
And then it's like, now we let the cards fall where they may.
Hmm.
And with through bodybuilding and through other competitive endeavors, you can realize that and experience that, which it's going to be very difficult in the greater scope of your life to ever say there's absolutely nothing else I could have possibly done to create a better
Hmm.
outcome or a higher risk, or so we say, a chance of outcome. But in the more controlled environment of physical training, I think you get, it's hard, but you get a stab at that. And that, I
Hmm.
think, for most people is such a wonderful thing that they can potentially start to experience there. That piece of, it's almost like a mix between peace and exhaustion.
Hmm.
Like at the end, for example, if it's a hard workout, I'll say someone is sparring in martial arts and they spar until like they're against someone that like is maybe just a little bit better than them. They go for hours and like at the end it's like they can barely stand up off the mat. You find me a happier person.
Hmm.
It's not gonna happen. There's this state where the tank is empty, but the happiness is at its highest, or the fulfillment, or whatever it is that we want to use to call that. And again, I love that physical training allows us to reach that state and potentially reach that state repeatedly, whether in the correct way, we hope, but probably much more commonly than we could ever achieve it kind of in any other endeavor. So would you say that for you, have you ever experienced that anywhere else close to, or was it really just in that prep because you felt like everything was so nailed in for so long that it just allowed you to achieve that level of peace of like, you know what, the universe is going to do what it's going to do, and I'm okay with it.
I think I've experienced similar in individual games of rugby league, but I haven't
Okay.
experienced it for such a prolonged period where, like, for example, a prep goes for 6 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever you do. I knew with absolute certainty that every single day there was nothing I was missing. And my fiance can attest to it, and she doesn't blow smoke up my ass. She'll tell me when I'm falling short.
Mhm.
And it's when people like my last prep, I failed. I had to pull out because I just simply the process I was with my previous coaches wasn't working, and so
Mhm.
I made the call to pull out. And it became this Ben can't diet and Ben can't, and she was in my defense being like, if you watch this guy work, he doesn't miss. There isn't a box that's missed. For 2 years, I
Mhm.
know for a fact that I ticked every single thing, and it was at a point where like whatever my muscle mass I have, whatever size I have, it is what it is. But I can be absolutely conditioned, and I can pose my ass off. I can master posing, and I can nail my condition. Well, you bet for fucking sure there was two things I did that entire prep was I dieted and I proved to myself like to simply prove that it was something I could get in stage condition because it's something I hadn't really achieved before. I've got lean but wasn't stage condition in my opinion, and put that purpose and practice in towards posing to present myself in an expressatory manner that I believe truly showed how much I love the sport for me.
Mhm.
And those two things I'd experienced over as the shows got closer and closer. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. Like, it's going to happen. And it was like, it was hard because coach kept saying, like, there's more fat to come off. We can do this. You got more in the tank. You got more in the tank. And there was a few weeks where I was like, bro, I'm breaking. Like, my body is like, I have genuinely found what I thought I found my limits before, but I have genuinely found that next limit that I did not know I had. But because of that, when I got to the state where my look on stage was respectable enough to me that I felt like it was right to be there, I have never experienced that. I've never experienced that. The only other place where I experienced that is when I'm balls deep in work and business and I'm looking at like, what content do we need to create? What problem are we solving? How do we help people? And we said this going back, 6 years ago when we first made the company and started doing content. If one person watches our stuff and changes their life, then that is worth it. And if we know we have one person watching, then it's our responsibility to show up and give the absolute best every single time we put something out. It might not be viral. It might not be something that 99% of the masses need, but the one person who's my philosophical approach to training in life is going to be better for it, then why the fuck are we not doing it? And
Yeah.
that is probably the only other place where we feel that level of fulfillment and almost flow state, where literally
Mhm.
suddenly I've just got this fixation of a project and the day's gone. And it's like,
Yeah.
where did the last? I forgot to even drink. I've got to backload 4 liters of water and 3 meals because 16 hours of the day's gone. And coach is going to be like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you under drinking? Like, why are you not hydrating?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, the day's gone, and I'm supposed to do this
Yeah.
thing." So that to me is probably the only other place really. And ironically, I
Mhm.
think the reason why, and this is, I think a lot of clients will attest to this. I'd never felt more selfish than in those last few weeks of prep because I had, like, to my standard, what I believe is delivering our coaching, I felt like I was falling short. Not a single client said it. In fact, every single client that we had on social media that followed me was responding to stories, to progress updates, to training footage. Like, holy shit, how are you like this hungry and still setting a PB or like reaching this top set or hitting this number? And it was this realization for me that my journey is a physical representation of the philosophy that we teach. And so with that, it is not selfish for me to push myself, but a responsibility so that our team,
Mhm.
a flow of a conversation there, I was getting excited. Our team and our clients and the people that watch can see almost what it means to go after something. And so
Mhm.
because I made it about others, that is where I think that next level of flow really came from. It wasn't
Yeah.
about being for me. It wasn't like the medal was almost irrelevant at this point. It was simply that I proved something that when 14 years ago now, when doctors said I'll never squat again, don't axial load, don't hit your spine, we're not going to do these things. You're going to just embrace back pain and chronic disability for the rest of your life. I to me disproved every single thing that they said. I proved
Mhm.
to myself that I'm still capable of doing something. And so now every single member of our staff, of our team, of our client list, our roster, they know now that when I speak on that, it is not out of wishful thinking. It's not out of arrogance. It's not out of never executing. It's from lived experience that, in spite of what someone tells you can be done, you can still do it. And I think that's where that connection, that deeper level of flow state really came from. Where when I got to all that, even though I felt the most selfish I'd ever felt, I literally said to my fiance, you know, I think a client finished up and it was like, it was just a simple graduation process, like, phasing them out as a graduation. They reached their goals. And I was like, man, the business is suffering because I'm training, I'm competing. I got to pull out. And she's like, don't you fucking dare. Like that to me is like, the second in my head I rationalized that we were going backwards because of me. I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And like that's how
Yeah.
much I realized I valued providing for our team and other people. But I had to
Yeah.
flip that switch and realize that the providing was through me completing this hard thing.
Mhm.
And I think that's
No,
where a lot of that flow state really came from on show day.
that to me is a wonderful illustration of a few things. First off, how much people love a quest,
Oh yeah.
right? Right there. I don't care if my coach is giving me a lesser service, and knowing you, you probably weren't, right? But they wanted to watch that journey. They
Mhm.
wanted to watch that hard work go towards something. And then when you're thinking about pulling out, there's we have this wonderful idea that we are a fantastic judge of how well we're doing,
Yeah.
and we're not. We're
Nope.
usually quite often the worst. And you think, oh, I need to do X because I'm failing here or something else. And a lot of the time you're actually self-sabotaging without even knowing you are, because
Hmm.
you're kind of maybe understating the good work that you are doing, or perhaps understating the bad work, or whatever you want to call it here, that you are doing there as well. And sometimes it's that trusted objective marker there that really is needed, to help keep you driving forward, and just to remember that, like, you're not, maybe your own perceptions aren't as trustworthy as you think they are, you know? And I'm I think if you weren't doing that as part of your coaching journey, then people would be far less attached to you.
Hmm.
Like, people, there are so many great coaches out there in the world, but like, people want you. And this
Hmm.
is something that I had to get my head around. So I'm kind of verbalizing this because I presume there's someone somewhere else, who's probably having the same thing. Like, maybe my programs aren't the best or whatever it is. Like, people are going to resonate with you as a person, and
Hmm.
sometimes that means you got to show them who you are as a person. And I think
Yeah.
that was possibly the best example you could have given of, like, this is who I am. Like, all of these testing circumstances, and I'm still going to go and do this thing anyway. So it was possibly the most selfless thing you did
That was the
in a
thing I had to wrap
really
my head around.
weird
Yeah.
roundabout way, you know. I think it
Yep.
was possibly the most selfless thing you did. But I think the other thing that maybe that brings to mind then is that people just get so encapsulated by seeing other people go after things. And it makes us question, why do we ever get ourselves in a position where we're not doing that?
Hmm.
It's a genuinely hard question to answer. You know, like you watch other people do these things, and as a society, as a human species, we're so invigorated by
Hmm.
watching these quests,
Why aren't
these
we doing it?
journeys, these successions. We love it. It's what we live for, you know, like the fundamental unit of human interest is essentially person A had problem X and did Y to solve it. Like
Hmm.
that's like almost how our entire brain structure in society is based. Like we want to collect as many of those little units as possible and put them together so we have this biggest possible toolkit that we can use to solve our own problems. And then it really is an odd question to ask yourself, like, why am I not doing that more? And you know, it's a
The,
difficult one to answer. Please give me your take on that.
well, I mean, the greatest representation of that I can think of is the way that America televises the draft. Like,
Mm,
literally think about it's almost a pinnacle moment of people that have nothing to do with this kid, this individual, this child, this adolescent who's now going to go make millions and millions and millions of dollars that you will never see. But people
mm,
will tune in for a 3 day weekend to watch the draft, and it's simply just going, where is this person or number X going to which team Y? And that can be a 3, 4 day extravaganza of people being like, "What did you watch the draft? I can't believe you went third round. I can't believe you went second round." Like it's such a bamboozling experience that people get so encapsulated and caught up in, and that leads me to when I coach someone, I'm asking like, why aren't you doing it? Or now that you've seen what's possible, or now you've seen that you love watching it, that it's possible. That the Heisman is a trophy presentation on TV. That's a big deal for high school football. In rugby league, we have what's called the Dally M's, which is like the greatest player of the year of the season, or the best player of the season. All of these individualized events where we look at and worship these individuals. One of the philosophies I try to teach is that we need to stop putting greatness on this out of reach pedestal that we should never aim towards and start to chastise and criticize. But instead, we should put greatness in this perspective that I should try and pull myself a little bit closer to that. Now, I don't need to
mhm,
be Michael Jordan. I don't need to be Andrew Johns. I don't need to be Tom Brady. But if I can look at that level of greatness and say, how can I deconstruct and reverse engineer just a few things that they do and try and pull myself a little bit closer, then surely I, in the rest of my life, will be a little bit closer to greatness. And greatness doesn't have to be some fulfilling, egotistical, you know, naive, narcissistic sort of greatness. It can be great in areas of your life. It can be greatness in other aspects. And that to me is what observing and understanding great people is all about. It's not because I want to sit around and circle jerk these individuals like, oh, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Jeff Bezos. But in and amongst the things that they did to get to where they are, there is a blueprint that the success leaves behind. And if we truly aspire to want to be our best selves, then we can look at that and say, what is it about them that got them towards that level of greatness that I can then deconstruct? Maybe I can take some of that trait. Maybe I can, as we spoke
mhm,
about, I can train some of that discipline. I can train those virtues a little bit more in myself. Suddenly I'm showing up as a better husband. I'm showing up as a better father. I'm showing up at work better. I'm getting tasks finished on time. I'm logging in on time. I'm showing up in all these areas. I might not be 6 foot X and African American and play center, and I'm not going to be, in the 90s Chicago Bulls team, but I can be pretty decent at doing these things that I'm doing by just taking some of that stuff. And that's where I think if we really look at the objective appreciation of greatness and these people that are doing the great things, we need to take a step back from just simply worshiping and look at it as characteristic development and what I can deconstruct from it. And I
yeah.
genuinely believe that would make each person better. Like when we articulate again, I brought you on this conversation, but here I'm talking about what we believe. We genuinely believe that there is a higher degree of potential that must be action in each person than what they truly think they're capable of. And
Mhm,
it's through these people that we can look at that and say, well, this person actualized that potential. What can we take away from that in your training, your life, your nutrition, your structure, routine, schedule, whatever it might be, that we can make you a little bit closer to greatness, your greatness, not theirs, just a little bit closer to your greatness, because you're going to be great at something. And why not push towards being that great thing in life?
mhm. I think that that whole mantra there, but also your moment of sitting there before your bodybuilding show and not caring whether you won. I think all of that collectively is a great kind of summation of the idea of it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game.
Hmm.
And that's a phrase that I think we will probably all utter at some point, usually to our kids or something like that, whatever. But I think it's something that's so fundamentally important that we perhaps say offhand, but that's really what we're talking about here is that greatness is a thing, sure, but like, why do you care about greatness that has no relation to you and no impact on you? It
Yes.
doesn't really make any sense fundamentally, but it's because there is things underlying greatness that are incredibly important to you. And that is, how does someone play the game to become great?
Hmm.
Because that's relevant. That's relevant to everyone in every
Yes.
phase of life, in everything they do. And it's not, some people will do everything right and reach a certain level, and some people will do everything right and reach another level. And that, we can't do a lot about that, but we can learn to play the game to the best of our ability. And that's, again, really what probably all of this is really about at the end of the day,
Hmm.
because playing the game well is very hard because it's not what if we just worried about what wins the next game, well, that's kind of hedonism, right? And if we only ever worried about what wins the last game, well, then delayed gratification would be taken to the extreme. It's
Hmm.
the correct amount of pleasure to get from your life right now is not zero. We can probably all agree on that. So
Hmm.
there's this immensely complex strategy of doing things in a way that serve you now and serve you in the future at every possible iteration of you in the future, and that over the long term gives you the highest possibility of success. And this thing is so abstract, it's even kind of hard to just talk about here verbally, but it's a thing and we all know it's a thing. And when we see greatness like that I think is why what we're tuning into and what we're trying to learn. And I
I
think
agree.
that's kind of maybe to a small degree there what you experienced in a microcosm for your bodybuilding show. It's like at that moment you were greatness kind of encapsulated. I'm not saying that to make you feel better about yourself, but you played the game in a way where like the outcome could not have been better. Doesn't matter what the outcome was,
Yes.
but for your specific context, there is not a way it could have been better. And that we can glean from anyone who achieves anything great in any context, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Michael Jordan, I'm sorry, or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's the guy who's run the corner shop down your street for 40 years successfully through COVID and everything else
Hmm.
in between. Like he's doing or she is doing something great and I think we almost have to redefine great in some ways because, anyone can be great for a day, but I would argue that's not great. It's
Hmm.
true greatness, and I think that resonates with us at like the most basal level is the sustained greatness, which is why people like Michael Jordan I think are looked up to. It's like he can go away from a sport and come back and do
Yes.
that in a way and still be the best. Like that requires these underlying principles and work ethics and characteristics that are so rare, but that we should all be striving to work towards no
Hmm.
matter what the endeavor may be. And I think that what you said there and your experience for that bodybuilding show is such a wonderful characterization of that. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And I think sometimes we do well to take that approach to our entire life. Like some
Yes.
days you'll win, some days you'll lose. But how did you play the game today?
Yeah.
Oh, I played it as well as I could. Well, then you can probably sleep okay.
And that to me, I think is it's the final curtain moment, right? When it's all said and done, can I look back and say that I have no regrets and played the game as best I possibly could
Mhm.
and left everything in my experience as much as possible better than I found it?
Mhm.
That to me is the ultimate curtain moment. I
Yeah.
can't decide at the end if it's going to be worth it or not. I can only live now in the assumption that doing better and trying to make the place better and trying to make people better and dedicate myself to something greater than self is going to be a look back where I can say I have zero regrets and a I'm not going out with anything left. There's no stones left unturned. I know that I played the game as good as I possibly could with the intention of making the greatest possible impact. And wherever that falls now is outside of my control. Now that could make me viral and it can have, I can impact a billion people, or it can make me an absolute nobody. But I know that
Mhm.
the ways in which I did impact at least made some difference in someone's life. And that I think is if we can get to that position at the end of it all, then I mean, if we look at Erickson's models of psychosocial development, there is a distinct moment or chapter in life at the end that is called despair versus appreciation, which is
Mhm.
if we get back to a certain period of time in our life and we look back and realize that we didn't have the impact that we wanted, or we didn't make things better, we didn't contribute to society, we develop an almost despair, arrogant, aggressive
Mhm.
frustration. And it ends up being externally projected. And it's where you get like those bitter, aggressive, almost mean elderly people that are kind of just like, that sort of like, get the fuck out of my way. And they're,
Mhm.
they're just bitter to be around. And life was this and life was this. And they fit that kind of stage of development of Erickson's model. And I think if you don't take that sort of approach of at the very end, I can know that there's no regrets. I'm not going to be bitter. I'm going to be going out guns blazing. As the great quake goes, do not go softly into that good night. One of my favorite poems. The
Mhm.
idea that we are going to go out swinging and there is nothing left, and it doesn't matter how that goes, but I am going to go out knowing that everything I could possibly do is done, and anything else outside of that is not in my control. What else is there?
Yeah.
What else can I possibly ask
Yeah.
for?
And you mentioned having your impact on X number of people there, and I love. I have no idea why you called it Mater Athletica, by the way, before I say this. So I just want to make that clear. But I love that term because matter can refer to like this table that has matter. It's real, right? But it also refers to like, well, we say things matter. So
Hmm.
like to us, that's kind of us intrinsically saying like, well, this table is made of matter, and therefore we decide that it's real. And when we say something matters, we're kind of also saying that that kind of is real and true in a
Hmm.
sense. And people matter way more than they think. And what I mean by that is, I think I can't remember where I read it, but let's say we're going to argue it's true for the sake of this conversation that the average person will meaningfully impact around 1,000 people during their life. And we say meaningfully in like some kind of life-changing way. So that means you're one step removed from impacting 1 million people
Hmm.
in a meaningful way. One step. I think that matters. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
think that matters greatly. And I think we have absolutely no idea how good things could get if every individual just leveled up their approach to life
Hmm.
a little bit and impacted those 1,000 people just that tiny bit better.
Hmm.
I mean, there's to go back to that Matthew principle, or if you get that spiral going in the right direction, man, like we've seen what happens when the spiral goes the other way. Like a lot of
Hmm.
the 20th century and times before that have kind of illustrated that to us for sure. But man, what happens when if we got that spiral going the other way? And I think maybe I would say this is too philosophical. I don't think anything is in this conversation, which is great. I think if every individual woke up to the fact that they matter and that by aligning and having these aims, that they can have these greater impacts that are potentially on as many as 1 million people, for some people it'll be more, then all of a sudden imagine that motivation that you now have because,
Hmm.
really intrinsically we are motivated to make life better for ourselves, but also others. But I think we underestimate how big that others category can be.
Hmm.
For us, that might be like, well, it's my wife and my kids and a couple of friends. It's like 10 people. But it's like, no, if it's 1,000 people for argument's sake, then that's a big deal. And like we said, they're more one step removed from 1 million. And
Hmm.
if all of us had an indirect effect positively on 1 million people, man, things are going to get really good really fast.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I teach
sorry,
that when I work with a new father, for example.
hmm
If I struggle to find a connection, or like for them to connect to their goal, a really easy strategy is one of the things I know. I hit it where it hurts, and I'll say to them, if your children grew up to live like you and how you're living right now, would you be proud of them? Because
hmm
the question I'm actually asking is, are you proud of yourself? That's got nothing to do with your
yeah,
kids. But in that moment, they also realize, oh, actually, I'm a role model. I am
hmm
going to dictate and impact how my kids live, the standards they see, the values they uphold, the principles they look to. All of these things are going to be predicated on me for the first 20 to 25 years of their life, and then probably carried forward. There are lessons still now from my father who passed away 8 years ago that I still look
yeah,
to now that I didn't appreciate when he's around. And I can look to that and say, well, he left that impact on me. And there's people that say that I do this to compartmentalize, and people that say that I'm trying to make up for a reason he wasn't here, this, that, and the other. But the hard work and traits that he showed to me now reinforce what I do. So there's these moments where it's like, okay, I'm just coaching a father, or I'm just coaching a man. No, you're coaching the leader of a family. So now your perception of who you're impacting has gone beyond one person, suddenly four or five or six, because that father and how he's going to show up is also a husband. And now that husband is also someone who's got a company and he runs a trade business. And now he's got five staff under him. Now, how he shows up to work is going to impact how those five staff view owning the business in the future. Because there are many tradesmen that grew up with like the old school dictator tradesmanship and apprenticeship, where it was like just be yelled at because you simply existed. That did not
Yeah.
create a great taste in your mouth about doing trades and running business. So you have this responsibility to be the best possible self that you can, because as a proxy, other people around you are going to be impacted whether you like it or not. It's like team culture. You don't get a choice whether culture is in play or not. It just simply is. It's up to you to decide if that is a positive or a negative culture, but you don't get to decide if there's culture. In the same way, you don't get to decide that you impact others. It's going to be whether it's positive or negative. So for when I'm working with someone, yeah, it's I look at it more as a how can I make this person better in every aspect of their life? Because that is going to then impact when I talk about wanting to impact a billion people, a million people, that suddenly becomes a much more feasible conversation and a realistic breakdown and tangible number than whether or not I just say I'm just going to go speak to a million people. No, I'm going to
Yeah.
impact this individual who's then going to carry our philosophies, our traits, our standards forward. They're going to uphold either their iteration of those traits, or they're going to develop their own in a way that they've reflected by working with us that they otherwise might not have achieved. And so that is my impact to them. And now that impacts and creates a ripple downstream. And so like it's such a powerful thing to look at when you're working with these people, to shape it as to how am I impacting them and those around them, because it is so much more than that one person, because you're shaping how they show up in the rest of their life. That is in essence a degree of coaching.
Yeah.
And we could ramble here. It's been literally, I think I booked
Uh,
this in for an hour and
I would
15 minutes.
I would like to comment on you losing your father, if that's okay with
Please.
you. And I apologize in advance if this is overstepping, but
No.
for context, I lost my father about 5.5 years ago to cancer. So I'm kind of trying to share something that I've kind of helped me, because I know you said you got feedback like, oh, you're trying to fill the void and all these compensation mechanisms or whatever, but I would like to put a different take on that. And that very first coach I ever worked with, his name's Lyle, based up in Scotland. He and his dad were like that. Even as adults, which is immensely rare to have
Yep.
like father and son who are inseparable even as adults. And so he was very close to his dad, and his dad was immensely successful in the golf coaching world. And when his dad was passing away on his deathbed, I believe, he said to him, "Don't cry because a man can't become who he's supposed to be whilst he lives in the shadow of his father." And I'm like, what a thing. And he tells me this just after my dad passes away, by the way. And I'm like, geez, what a thing to say on your deathbed, you know?
Yeah.
And
If there's some
I
final
felt like,
words.
yeah, but I tell you what, my dad passed away, and literally it's been about 5.5 years now. 5.5 years of my life have been the most incredible, positive tornado of
Hmm.
experiences I could have ever imagined.
Hmm.
And I'm not gonna, destiny, fate, I don't care what's at play, whether it exists or not. But I just want to say to you, like, if it's been 8 years, I believe you said, since your father passed, and the last 8 years have been this upward spiral for you, well, maybe you're not compensating. Maybe it's not all these things. Maybe what happened in the way it's exactly supposed to happen,
Yep.
unfortunately, in the short term, that allowed you to escalate yourself and become who you are today, who's going to have this massively positive impact on the world. So I hope, I choose to believe those words because I
Hmm.
think it gives some good meaning and positivity to what happened, and allows me to feel more reinforced in my path forward in life. And
Hmm.
maybe it does that a little bit for you too, I hope. But I just want you to know there's another viewpoint there to be had for
Oh,
sure.
I appreciate that, and I've been an open book since day one. I think people want to see what isn't there because it's what they might feel, and a lot of the time, like our first documentary we ever did on my prep in 2022, I think, 2019 was my first ever prep.
Hmm.
Dad passed away in 2018, and it we documented, sorry, my 2022 prep, and part of
Hmm.
the conversation was why bodybuilding and sort of what it got to. And one of the things that I said was I had talked about it for so long, and I realized, and this is what one of the valuable lessons of him passing was. I said it's one of the most painful but greatest things that ever happened to me, and people couldn't really understand or comprehend it. Is that I watched a man work his ass off 12, 14 hours a day as a form work laborer, 6 days a week, to only end up sick and broken anyway, and develop cancer and go through 10 years of terminal diagnoses, end up in ICU, and end up in hospice, and so that sort of thing, and pass away. So what a responsibility I now carry to make sure that I live a life where it's it's inherently important that I give the absolute best that I can, because I'm going to go out anyway. If you
Hmm.
can work hard towards something and still receive pain and suffering that is the worst excruciating pain you could possibly imagine, then isn't it a responsibility of me to work towards something that will be to be beneficial and productive and still be hard work and suffering, but it's towards making things better in case of when I go out and because I'm going to go out. And so I took it as this responsibility, it's time to take control. And as you sort of alluded to, it definitely opened up a different, I don't want to say a different world of thinking. I think it confirmed to me that it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore in the sense of what everyone else's thoughts are, what their opinions are. I always knew that I was weird. I always knew I was different. I didn't fit in socially. I was kind of like I fit in because I was supposed to fit in, not because these are like what I wanted to do. And all these things I'd talked about doing, I realized that I kept talking about it, and kept talking about it. And it was just like there was part of me that was holding back in just being who I was. And it took him leaving for me to realize that there was more to it, and I need to go after it because life is short. He died at 59. Like when I looked at it in a numbers perspective, he was only, oh God, 34 years older than me, right? So at that point in time, I was 25, I believe, 26. Yeah, I was about 26, 25. And it was not very far away, right? Realistically, I've already been alive 25 years. He's only 34 years older than me. So I'm nearly halfway to the age that he got to. It can all go pretty quickly. I don't have much time here, so I don't have time to sit here and play the guessing games and play the, what if or coulda, shoulda, woulda, type conversations in my head. One of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs, where I don't like people that rip on, like they have their takes on people that actually appreciate their work. We only have a small period of time to do a great thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it unfortunately took him going and to go through what he went through for me to look at that and realize, well, I've only got a shorter time. If I use that as my benchmark, I've got a pretty short time to do a great thing. So that for me was like how I flipped it. And then, as you sort of alluded to, the ironic part was in pursuit of that, every single thing that has ever since then become a better position for me stems from me deciding to start bodybuilding. And I started bodybuilding because I said it's no longer acceptable to play the what if game. I'm going to go out eventually anyway. Then, at the worst case scenario, I need to prove that I can do this to myself and I can actually reach that thing. And then it just spiraled uphill from there. Of course, what a great privilege it is to suffer towards the goals that we say we want and to be
Mm-hmm.
exhausted in pursuit of the goals that we are striving towards. But those hardships are the choices that I've made. I've made those choices to diet, to suffer, to be hungry. Exactly the same as yourself. We've chosen those hardships in spite of everything else going on. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people take time to look at. I don't view death as suffering or grief. I view it as a celebration, reflection of life, and what
Yeah.
this person was. I celebrate that this person was here to impact me, not that they're now gone. And I think that's a much more rewarding way to look at, and I guess a way to remember that person than simply like, yeah, you grieve for someone they passed and it's over, right? It's kind of like, oh, moving on with life. But when you look at,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm carrying part of this person in the values and traits that I abide by and the principles that I live up to, it's a lot more fulfilling and a form of remembrance than just simply like, oh, I grieved, drank at their funeral, now they're dead. Like that to me,
Yeah.
it's very, very different. So yeah, no, I want to wrap this up because we could literally go for 3.5, 4 hours,
Yeah.
really. But what I wanted to ask you, and because we've talked so much philosophy and so much psychology, that I think it'll take people several listens to this to actually comprehend what we spoke about. If there is let's make this a twofold question: advice to yourself going through those moments you spoke about that led you to where you are, but in
Mm-hmm.
alongside of that, what would be the advice you have to coaches, to athletes, to individuals right now that generally listen to this that may be going through the hardships that they want to quit? I believe those two kind of intersect and would be kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
they're two different perspectives, but I think they kind of intersect because you're kind of speaking to both.
Yeah, sure. So my very first tattoo was and I got ripped to shit for this because I was a scuba instructor. But there's a song by We Came as Romans called Just Keep Breathing, and I
Mhm.
got the words Just Keep Breathing written on my rib cage, which was an interesting place to get your first tattoo, I'll say that. Um and that I got that for a reason because that was basically me doing the first part of that question, I think, but doing it in the moment. It
Mhm.
was doesn't matter how bad things are, you just got to keep going forward. And as we kind of said earlier, a lot of the time we can't really judge whether something's good or bad
Mhm.
until we know the final outcome. And as we've kind of alluded, like for the record, the story of your dad and your experiences afterwards are almost carbon copy to my own. It's to the point where it's almost scary. And in the yeah, but in the moment, it's an immensely positive thing. But I'm kind of like you, like obviously I wish you were here, but like if
Yeah.
someone said like, is the passing of your father a positive or a negative impact on your life? I would have to say positive. Like, as
Yeah.
horrible as that may sound to some people who maybe view it differently, it has been immensely positive
Yes.
for me in what has happened since and how it changed my mindset and how it changed me as a person. In the exact same way that, you know, going through what I did earlier in my life changed me in an equally better way, despite it being absolutely, truly, and horrible in ways that I didn't even know existed at the
Hmm.
time. So, I mean, I think for both of those questions, my point would be that you you really don't know what the greater context of what you're going through or meaning of it is in the moment, because that's impossible to know. That's why it's the greater context, right? But
Hmm.
the way that we can flip this is the way I try to flip things now. And obviously, it's easier sometimes said than done. But if you go through one, what you perceive as horrible thing, and then a few years later look back at it as the best thing you ever experienced, is not entirely possible that all the other horrible things you
Yeah.
encounter could also be the same. You know, if it can be true once, it can be true twice. And unfortunately, I'm sure it's not true for every horrible thing you will experience, but there's definitely at least a chance that something you're going to look back at it and go, well, damn, like, thank God for that, or whatever it is that you want
Hmm.
to say in response. So I think if we look back on the horrible things that happen retrospectively in the right way and try to find those little bits of positivity that come, or in some cases like mine, huge bits of positivity that come as a result of them, if you're willing to unpack that, then it makes it a lot easier to face horrible things going forward, because you've got that notion and that evidence that, like, actually what I think is horrible may not be in truth. And I think that would be my advice.
I love that. Great answer. I literally have nothing else to add to it because yeah, I think it's a great way of looking at it and trying to understand it. Um, One final question,
Mhm.
and this is something interesting in because I think there's a lot of options. Um,
Mhm.
One book, and it can be any book that you could possibly imagine, training, physiology. I know you're literally writing a book, so we'll
Mhm.
recommend that one too when it comes out. Um, but what book would you recommend to everyone listening right now? We're speaking to coaches, we're speaking to athletes, we're
Yeah.
speaking to Gen Pop, high performance individuals. That's usually who our audience tends to be. Young men getting after it and trying to grow and improve their life. What would be one book that you recommend everyone reads?
Oh man. Honestly, and this is going to be almost context independent in truth, probably The Art of Living by Thich Nhat Hanh. Um, Man, that guy, rest in peace. He is the only author I've ever met that can make you feel better within a sentence. Just his general view, and you can tell he lived it as the way he writes it. If you
Yeah.
understand, like, you can tell it's genuine, the way he interprets the world and the way he talks about things. And no matter who you are, what you're doing, what your goals are, being happy and fulfilled and interpreting the world less callously, shall we say, is never going to not be of interest
Yeah.
and not going to be a benefit. And I find his work, specifically that book, but he has many that are very, very good. But I think that one's an easy read that will apply to everyone. It helps shift your aim upwards. And the thing is, when you believe the world can be a happy, good, productive, fulfilling place, well, then you change your perception and you actually perceive and see all the things that are in line with that aim and that belief. And I'm all too aware of this because I've been on the opposite end of that belief spectrum. And trust me, you can perceive the world as absolute 10th circle of hell if you want to, and you can be in the exact same room and perceive it as the opposite, all based on your perception, your kind of up your aim, and how you want to see the world in reality. And
Hmm.
that really does put the onus on the individual, but I think that's where the onus lies. And his work, like, you read it, and it does, I don't care how bad your day is, you can read a couple of pages of him and be like, you may not go from miserable to happy, but you're going to be less miserable, and you're going to be like, you know what, there is good in this world and I can do better, and I can appreciate things considerably more. You'll just make little statements like, why does it take being ill to mean that you
Yeah.
appreciate being healthy? Do you know what I mean? And we all know this, right? Like, you get a cold and you can't breathe through your nose for a week, and then the first day you can, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like, why does it have to be that
Yeah.
way?
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of this in the same way that every other human being is. But, like, I don't care who you are. If you could take some of his mindset and implant it in you in any way, you are going to be better off. So it'd be that one, The Art of Living.
I love it. That's great. That's yeah, fantastic recommendation, mate. Let's wrap it up there, guys. It has been a fantastic chat. One of many. I have absolutely no doubt. Where can everyone
I hope
find
so.
you? We'll put the links in the show notes. But what is the best ways to contact you guys and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So we have our website now, trainkaizen.com, which is basically a hub for our coaching primarily, but we also offer like training plans and diet plans and consultations and that type of thing, which, we love, but the coaching is like our bread and butter. It's like,
Yeah.
95% plus of our business because that's how you make the impact that we want to make. And then in terms of social media, the only thing I have is Instagram, which is at Tom_Kaizen. I'm also a lot of the educational stuff that we put out is also on the Elite FTS YouTube channel and Instagram and stuff there as well. So that might be another place to look, especially if it's related to more of the training and the physical or nutrition side of things as well. But that's pretty much it. We're pretty low key in that regard. We just like to go about our work and work with the people we do, and we look immensely lucky to love what we do.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you on the podcast, and
Thank you.
I can't wait for both to come out because I think it's going to be such a continuation of a
Yeah.
fantastic conversation that was already, I think, 3 hours with
Yeah.
Dave and yourself. But this has been a great continuation of that sort of conversation at a deeper level. So, mate, I appreciate you jumping on, and thank you very much for giving us your time.
No, this was great fun. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.